Good morning. I had a friend in Vancouver, Robert Young, the artist, who used to say that it was uncivilized to talk about art before breakfast, but I guess we've had breakfast, so we're good to go. TrepanierBaer Gallery specializes in Canadian and international modern and contemporary art. We represent 25 artists ranging in age from 25 to 78 years old, all working in a variety of media. And in addition to representing our artists, that is selling their work, organizing exhibitions, attending art fairs, publishing catalogs, doing appraisals, we have, since the establishment of the gallery, managed and consulted on many public art projects and commissions, ranging from modest individual and family portraits, valued at several $1,000s, to much more complex and large-scale public art installations valued in the millions of dollars. In fact, we do so much work in this area now that we've established a new company called Art to Public that specializes in public art commissions and offers expertise in the area. Currently, we have 3 major projects on the go, one that will be unveiled here in Calgary on March 14th, a second I can't speak about because it hasn't been announced, and a third for a new building at the University of Western Ontario for a major painting measuring 8 by 24 feet by the artist Ryan Sluggett, who some of you may know. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm going to assume that most people in this room are aware of the current literature and theories about what makes cities great. We tend to agree that culture, in the broadest sense of the word, and access to cultural infrastructure, that is theaters, museums, art galleries, libraries, concert halls, sports venues, cinemas, clubs, parks, public art, and architecture, all figure in the mix and have something to do with providing and sustaining what we're calling the soul of the city. But what about great public art? How do we get from A to B, from site to idea, from maquette to construction, to shipping, to installation, to unveiling, and to something we can categorize as great, or at the very least good? Remember that every sculpture or public art installation is a creative act, usually done in collaboration amongst various peoples and agencies. And we all know what that means, varying agendas. So how do you stay the course? I'm going to present 4 projects, one in a little more detail, this one by McWilliams, than the others. I'd like you to think about process and what I said a minute ago, that public art is a creative act usually done in collaboration. Afterward, when the other speakers are finished their presentations, the floor is open to questions, we can have a fuller discussion. The artist Al McWilliams, working with the architects Juice Baker and Bruce Hayden for the Royal Canadian Navy Monument, unveiled in May of 2012. This is their maquette. This was a competition that they won. The budget was $1.28 million. The clients were the Government of Canada, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Capital Commission. The invitation, or the problem to solve, was to create a monument, timeless in design, of national significance that would reflect the past, present, and future of the Royal Canadian Navy, an institution shaped by nature and tradition. The artist and his team were given the site called Richmond Landing, you'll see it in a minute, across from Parliament Hill, a site loaded with history where once long ago settlers unloaded their cargo from boats to haul it along the road to Richmond, Ontario. Let's consider the site and how the artist reacted. Remember, he had no choice in the site. Richmond Landing is shaped like the prow of a boat. It echoes the shape of Canada as a tri-coastal nation surrounded by water on 3 sides. An interesting site. The artist and his team had extensive information on the angle of the sun throughout the year, weather conditions, history, naval references, and a clear physical boundary. In addition to the site, there were requirements for the Navy motto, "Ready, aye, ready," and for the battle honors to be incorporated into the monument. But the Royal Canadian Navy most of all wanted something that they described as enduring, and to that the artist said this. This is Al McWilliams' words. "This was the biggest challenge, but the most liberating. It meant we could be free of any figuration that would place us in a specific time frame and allowed us to think more deeply and symbolically." And this is very important. So what next? After walking the site over and over again, thinking about materials, the notion of endurance, making models, and placing them in situ. The pivot came when the artist was reading Joseph Brodsky and thinking about Venice, and he realized that, as Brodsky had, that when you're on the water, it's not your eyes and ears that tell you you're on the water, but your feet. Water unsettles the sense of horizontality. At that moment, the artist realized that the slab on which the signature was to be placed, that is the wall, this piece here, had to be tilted to create a sense of displacement. The lawn beyond the sculpture had to be slightly inclined, and the gold sphere offset from the signature. That's the wall. Suddenly an idea, suddenly drama, suddenly something sufficient to move forward. Here's the checklist. A great site, noble materials, marble, granite, to create a form charged with meaning. The arc of the oak trees symbolizing the heart of oak, the official march of the RNC. The inclined lawn conceived to stage the annual Battle of the Atlantic ceremony and to reinforce the unsettling of horizontality and water. The signature, the wall representing sails of days gone by, naval attire, contemporary stealth design, and at night the hull of a ship. The motto, "Ready, I ready," and the battle honors etched onto the east and west faces of the signature. The gold sphere offset to the signature, reinforcing the unsettling of the horizontal and being on water, and representing the sun, moon, and stars, and the global reach of the Navy. Marry all of that, the ideas that the artist had, with a great client, one that was open-minded, frank, resourceful, and patient. This took a long time to realize. A great artist, one who listened to the client, and a healthy budget. What did we get? We got a wonderful work of art that became a monument to the enduring legacy, past, present, and future of the Royal Canadian Navy. These are a few slides of other works that are in Ottawa, and one of the important things to think about is that when we place a work of art, we place it in the context of an urban environment, but also in the context of other works. And what's happening here in Calgary is really interesting, because over the last decade, we have some pretty interesting projects. So as we walk around the city now, we're creating a sort of outdoor museum. And I think that's really exciting, and I think it's something that we should really consider as we move forward in terms of elevating the bar, so that these works can talk to each other and talk to us, talk to the citizens and visitors of this place. Douglas Coupland, Bobber Park, Canoe Landing Park, is a work by Douglas Coupland, realized in 2009. This was not a competition. The artist, who had a relationship with the developer Concord Pacific, was personally invited to realize the commission. The budget was $2.5 million. By the way, the budget in the last project was $2.8 million. The invitation, or the problem to be solved here, was to create an art installation in the manner of a theme park that would acknowledge place, mark history, remind us of the nature-culture relationship, entertain us, and get this, knowing that the Gardner Expressway, George, you'll like this, is coming down in 2025. The city wanted the developer to establish a link between Canoe Park Landing and Lake Ontario. That's long-term thinking. Those of you who know Toronto, that the space between Front Street and the lake is landfill, and so where the canoe is here is the exact spot where the shore was in 1800. Like the previous piece, this one is loaded with Canadian iconography, not unlike the Naval Monument. Canoes, icebergs, the benches are in the shape and form of icebergs, fishing bobbers, beavers, all signs and symbols that speak to Toronto's relationship to Lake Ontario and to Canada's northern reality and heritage. What is interesting about both of these projects is the choice of artists. One, Al McWilliams, who comes out of modernism and abstraction, the other out of pop and representation, and both were perfectly suited to the problems they had to solve. And that's a function of how the client framed the commission, the language used when the call was made, which is another important element for a successful project. This is another piece by Doug, The Monument to the War of 1812, also in Toronto. This is very near Fort York. You can see there's a very playful kind of quality to Doug's work. And this was just unveiled in Vancouver, the Infinite Tire, in commemoration of Canadian Tire, the corporation. This was actually built here by Heavy Industries in Calgary. And now we come to the final two projects located in Calgary in the East Village. These are two major works, one by British artist Julian Opie and the other by Calgarian Ron Moppett. This was an international invitational competition involving 10 artists, 5 Canadians, 5 from abroad, selected by a jury from a slate of 25 artists from around the world. The total budget for both pieces was about $1.8 million. This was an exciting project for several reasons, not the least being the site, which at the time of the call was fluid. It was an unfinished construction site full of possibilities. That married with the East Village Master Plan, which articulated a vision for one of the most forward-thinking, progressive urban renewal sites in North America. That vision and the progressive thinking on the part of the client, CMLC, created a culture that permeated the public art component of the East Village Riverwalk Plan, which challenged the artists and created an element of risk-taking. The invitation, or as I have called it before, the problem the artists were asked to solve, was multidimensional in this case, and both conceptual and practical. The list was long: to celebrate nature, to interface the interface of the river with the urban mass, to create elements of surprise and delight, public safety, beautify the site, cover an ugly abutment or wall, celebrate our cultural diversity and history, identify place, and so on and so forth. And like Al McWilliams' piece, through a well-run competition, a series of numerous consultations, site visits, we were able to realize two outstanding works for the City of Calgary. Julian Opie's Promenade and Ron Moppett's The Same Way Better. So this is a very difficult site. You know where this is. This is just north of the homeless shelter, and you know what goes on there. And the problem that we were faced with, and that the artist was faced with, was to mark East Village. They wanted something iconic that could be seen from all 4 cardinal points, that would make this site a little friendlier at night and during the day, and would identify the kind of thinking that East Village or CMLC has around this site, which is forward-thinking, progressive, avant-garde-ish. Julian Opie created a piece, this is the tower in construction, that is a 4-sided, 24-foot-high LED sculpture that was fabricated in Barcelona, Spain by a company called Imago. And these figures move. It's based on the notion of a Greek frieze that's been animated, and the idea is to, in addition to mark the site, to talk a little bit about the pedestrians that are in the area, traffic flows, and to, you know, celebrate and delight and surprise people who are in that area, who come upon that area. This is looking at it from toward the, looking at it in the shadow of the EnCana building, which we'll hear about in a few minutes. Ron Moppett, the last piece, was challenged with creating a work of art that would hide this wall. And that was one of the issues that came up with this project. We were asked to deal with abutments, LRT, walls, very, very difficult sites. And Ron came up with a piece called The Same Way Better Reader, which is 120 foot long by 13 foot high, a glass tile mosaic that was fabricated at Mayor of Munich in Munich. It was unveiled in October of this year, and it is an absolutely spectacular site. Here we are in Munich, where Ron is working with the master mosaicist, choosing the color and types of glass for the site. Here we are in construction. The wall that supports the mosaic. This took 1 year to build and a month to install. And now it hides that abutment, which is on that pedestrian walkway between the river and 6th Avenue. On the east side of the pedestrian walkway will eventually be a condominium development, so people living there will be walking by and facing this absolutely wonderful piece done in a very traditional style. But the artist is very progressive, so we have the marriage of a kind of classical medium with a very avant-gardist, for lack of a better term, artist and way of making art. Here we are during that snowstorm in the unveiling. And here's what it looks like now in a more or less finished state. So the point I'm trying to make, and we can talk about this later, is how do we get to great art, great public art? And there is a process. It doesn't always work. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about that in the question and answer period.